Welcome to the Fan to Fan podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau. And today we have an amazing guest, Charles Pinion. Charles is a filmmaker, a musician, an artist. Charles has worked in the underground, transgressive, subversive corners of cinema. He's a true pioneer of DIY filmmaking, from the hallucinatory mayhem of twisted issues, grotesque splatter, collage that is Red Spirit Lake and We Await. Charles in his career has really pushed the boundaries of what like shot on video VHS horror can be. He blends a little bit of gore, psychedelia, and definitely punk rock, and we'll kind of get into that for sure. Kind of like this big melting pot, brain melting pot, really. And because Pete and I have done a deep dive into 3D films, especially discovering some of those 3D films that were released in the 80s during our formative years, like Friday the 13th Part 3 and Jaws 3 and Amityville 3, Charles also directed American Mummy, aka Aztec Blood, which we'll certainly get into in 3D. And you definitely want to check out his website, charlespinion.com. CharlesPinion.com, where you'll see more about his work, from his music to his filmmaking to illustration, artwork, and so much more. And since we're going to get into Charles's punk rock roots, Pete, you're sporting your indie band love right there.
Yeah, Cold Cave. I saw them in Tampa when I lived in Florida for a number of years. So
I was curious where you live in Florida.
I lived in St. Petersburg.
In Petersburg. I lived in Brandon for a year.
Okay.
If you remember Brandon?
Sure. Yeah, not too far.
On the 50. Yeah.
And I grew up on Long Island, so I'm interested to hear about your experiences growing, working, living in New York City. Near and dear to my heart, New York, even though I'm no longer a New Yorker.
Right. God damn it. I know. I mean, I lived there 4 years, and I remember my first 2 weeks there felt like 6 months, but then suddenly my first year there felt like a month or so. It was like suddenly this weird kind of accordion of density, and then suddenly, fuck, really? That's so fast.
So was that a culture shock for you coming from Gainesville?
Well, I went to art school in Syracuse.
Okay.
So the intention of many of my classmates was to move to New York after graduation, which in my head, I kind of, that sounds like a great idea. And then I realized, I have absolutely no resources to do that. I hadn't really factored in many of my classmates they had the resources. Suddenly they had a loft and wherever, and they were, and in the scene and fine artists. Nothing to say against their art, just more like my hillbilly though. Really, I had to go back to Florida to get a job teaching at a adult senior living center and stuff like that, teaching art.
Your dog approves.
But I was an Air Force brat. I didn't actually grow up in Gainesville.
Okay.
3 years here, 3 years there, Japan, Texas, I mean, all over the place. And then finally in college age-ish kind of thing, after I graduated from Syracuse, I moved sort of back to Gainesville, which was kind of a family home because my grandfather was a professor. But anyway, so Gainesville really was more adult, the tail end of college and entering punk rock and stuff like that. Yeah.
I would say that's where Pete, you and Charles kind of have that in common, where you're both somewhat nomadic souls, and you also have that shared history, the hallowed ground that is both Florida and also New York, but seemingly in kind of like pivotal times in your lives. Like you mentioned, Charles, if Florida is kind of an anchor, maybe, between your travels, between your service.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. I mean, it still feels like an anchor, a place that if I go back there, I mean, I have many friends still there, and And I think for a long part of my being away, I was like, well, eventually I'm going to move back to Gainesville. And I don't think that's going to happen now, but uh, it wouldn't, it's very appealing, actually. I mean, Florida is kind of accelerated toward its own thing right now that maybe I'm not so into politically and so on, and the general vibe. Yeah. But I mean, the people are still the great people they ever were. You know, my friends, they're just as, you know, against what's going on around them as, you know, me in sunny California, where I can sort of have the illusion of being in a more, you know, progressive context.
Yeah. So do you find, having moved around quite a bit, like, do you get like wanderlust to move on to elsewhere? Or I've listened in some interviews of you talking about kind of, you know, especially in New York, like showing up at, like, you know, working for Screw Magazine and places like that. And just kind of, you're around long enough, then you start to get in with the certain crowds and subcultures. Do you ever find like after there's like shelf lives in places that you've been where it's like time to move on, or what kind of drives your compass as you've made your way?
You know, the rhythms of my life well into adulthood were sort of 3 to 4 years at each location, you know, and part of it was because when my dad was in the Air Force, you know, we would move 3 years there, and yeah, those rhythms continued until finally hitting like San Francisco. I was there 6 years, then I moved down here, but then I was only here for a couple of years. Then I moved away again. Anyway, so I've been back here since 2002. So this is the longest I've been anywhere. And I haven't moved away. And I don't really I don't have that same kind of wanderlust. I mean, I'm open to sabbaticals. I like the idea of a sabbatical. Like, you know, like, oh, maybe I'll take 3 months. I mean, when I was a printmaker, like, or an artist, whatever, visual artist, yeah, I mean, printmaking intaglio involves a big press and baths of acid and this and that. So I would maybe locally find a class that's a college summer class or something. So for 6 weeks and then I would just live there. So I like that kind of focus, and making movies is like that too. You know, okay, I mean, in as much as I also edit the movies, then it becomes this never ending kind of, you know, purgatory as you're trying to finish the thing. But yeah, you know, now I got dogs, I got a home, I got a girlfriend. I mean, you know, I'm just sort of like, I don't have the wanderlust. But I'm intrigued by the people who are still really working hard, or the young people who are actually doing the whole subculture of filmmaking now. That yeah, you know. Anyway, I mean, making a movie is a hell of a lot of work. Anyone can tell you, and it involves marshaling, especially at the low budget level, which is basically the only place I've been. So much of it is marshaling energies and getting people excited and getting people passionate, and no paycheck in the underground. I mean, nowadays, I don't know. I guess maybe I don't even know how to do it now, but it was always just friends, from the music to the art direction to the this. It's just friends. I've always done it that way. Been lucky enough to be in creative context, Gainesville, New York City, and San Francisco, wherein there was just this incredible pool of people. I've yet to make a truly independent thing here, and part of the reason because, well, I mean, speaking of pools of people, you got your craftsmen and your cameramen and your this and your that and your real actors who actually go to auditions, and
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, it'd feel dumb not to use those people. But truthfully, I feel more at home in a kind of non-professional. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, the me who was in a punk rock band and making Twisted Issues in 1988 would be like, you moved to Hollywood? Talking to myself decades later, yeah, really? You know, yeah. So,
Well, I think we'll get into that. I mean, because I think originally how we got put in touch with you was through fellow friend Nick Dyack. And, Bernie and I are working on our little side project, well, not little, but side project of our look at 80s 3D movies, which you have produced one, not in the 80s, but you've produced one
right.
not too long ago, American Mummy, which we'll get into. But I'm curious because you have like this punk rock background, and I think a lot about punk rock is very much like a DIY aesthetic, and that from what I've listened to you in interviews and read about you, that seems to be like a real through line through a lot of your career. So I'm curious, and maybe we'll just get into this now. Sorry, Bernie, for no introductions.
No, all good. Let's do it.
But having that background and made like those early films that you did on video and things like that with friends and being involved with I'm blanking on his name right now, but the cinema of transgression stuff that you were able to work.
Richard Kern.
Richard Kern. Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
To do something like American Mummy, which is more standard, low budget, but more like you were talking about, you've got to hire professional actors, all that stuff. What was that like moving from that more DIY aesthetic into something a little more, I guess, structured?
Gosh. Now that it's not 2014, I'm trying to promote American Mummy. I feel like I can be a little more frank about its my assessment of it. Although that doesn't, my assessment doesn't need to answer your question. Listen, to answer your question, I'll tell you one just visceral aspect of doing this movie, American Mummy, was okay. We had this very remote set. I mean, that part's super authentic. We drove way the fuck out because we wanted to find places where we didn't see any
telephone poles, I think you mentioned.
Yeah. Because we got to be remote, and that's harder than you think, I mean, and of course, in the modern age, well, we could just paint those out, well, whatever. But so we wanted to find that, but cars were getting stuck, getting to set, and leaving set, and then once we got stuck, we had a truck come out to pull us out. That truck got stuck, and then this giant mega truck had to come out to take out that truck. It was insane. And so in that sense, it has some similarity to Red Spirit Lake, in that Red Spirit Lake was set in the snow and really was cold and all that kind of stuff. So here we have another privation of a location. But we had tents, and if you've seen the movie, it doesn't matter if you haven't. But anyway, there's tents in the desert, and I would sleep out there with the tents because that's where we kept the cameras and the lights and whatever. And I just did that to protect it, even though, I mean, my God, I don't think anyone could have found the place. It was really humming. It was really remote. But the morning that, it was the first day of shooting, and I woke up, and the great thing is wake up and you walk around the set. I felt like I was in Disneyland after dark or whatever, but it was the morning, and I was just walking around like, okay, yeah, this is, imagining the reality of the film, the characters and this tent. And then, going up, kind of climbing up into this kind of hill thing and looking toward this dirt road because these people are supposed to come, and somewhere I have video of it. Suddenly a car, this line of cars. And I remember, and then some sort of grip truck and I've never experienced that. And then again, within the, compared to an actual Hollywood movie, American Mummy was far, far from that. But the point that for me, there were like over a dozen cars coming in. I'm like, this is insane in the sense of responsibility and pressure. And okay, it's the buck is with me because I'm the director and I have the vision. I know what I want. Because that's also, you're also fighting that. I mean, that's a big difference. I'm fighting that. I mean, fighting other energies who have a fiscal investment in the movie. Mm-hmm. Or that they got someone else to answer to. My producer, who is actually in the movie as well, he plays the Russian. so it's kind of, you're just kind of having to stand your ground. I mean, all that stuff. When I compare it in the most simple way between shooting my video movies and shooting a real movie is video movie. Okay, I want to move in. I'm moving in. Real movie. Okay, we need to build a track here, or we need to, and then I'm talking to, we want to go light it, and and everyone's trying to do their best. So, like the DP, for example, a woman named Jennifer, Jenny, she at one point we're shooting one of the night shots inside a tent, and I'm just seeing the people in this frame, and I'm going, we need a little more light on her side of her face. And Jenny says, oh, well, we don't really have a motivation for that. And I said, light fairies. And she goes, just light fairies. And so that became a wonderful shorthand because, she's trained to do it where we need a lamp to this and everything has a reason. And I'm a painter. I don't really care. I just want some light on the side of this woman's face, right? Or whatever. So we had that nice shorthand of light fairies. And American Mummy also, we used it's 2 cameras, but it had a fixed aperture, focal length. So, it's kind of wide. So the whole movie is basically like a honeymooners episode, in terms of like people enter spaces and there's not a lot of movement. I just rewatched Parasite for this competition, and there's a lot of movement in that film and varied focal lengths, and it's a beyond a doubt a better movie than American Mummy. But that limitation also became a thing, just, and I'm all about embracing what we have. If that's the focal length that we have, let's make the movie work with that focal length. That's fine.
Yeah.
And because it's 3D, American Mummy in 3D is, I find, marvelous, really, because there's like these dioramas, the sort of a shoebox proportioned, which is the screen, that you kind of lean into, and you sort of feel like you're looking around things. And I think it really works well in 3D. I do. It has script problems, it has all kinds of problems, but visually and narratively, I like it in 3D. I love it in 3D. However, in 2D, the mind gets impatient with the static frame.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And I know the movie, and I'm like, God, real in this shot for a long time at this exact angle. Damn, it seems like it's going on forever. But again, in 3D, it works because, again, you're looking into this. Because I used to love like Metropolitan, what do you call a science museum and stuff. The dioramas with like,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, love that stuff as a kid, as an adult. I love that stuff, and that's for me what American Mummy was. And so for me, that it does work in 3D and 2D. I'm not so crazy about it. A good movie should work in both. Yes, I know. But the things I mentioned, those are the main things. Because no matter what budget a movie, I have to feed everyone. That's my bottom line. Like, might not be a paycheck, but everyone's not going to go hungry. I mean, we're making a movie. It's hard work. And so that was just so many people, and and you're just and I had to really just, my hope was just to perpetually be the good cop, because there are all these the bad cops are around me, the producer, this, everybody had but and initially it worked that way, and then the dynamic shifted, and suddenly the thing is, if no one's going to be, say, the AD, we had an AD or whatever. The fact that at one point I said, guys, we got to shoot this. I'm like, the fuck? Why am I yelling this? Like, the AD is supposed to protect you from that. Anyway, And the thing is, I mean, we still laughed and had fun, but my three child video movies, I mean, they were just fun.
Yeah.
Just fun. So much fun.
There's a comment you'd said, Charles, in one of the interviews that really spoke to me. And it was that the art talks back to you. And I think kind of chronicling your journey, you talk about Gainesville, you're shooting documentaries for punk bands. You get to New York, you're working, like Pete mentioned before, with Screw, and as a fellow comic book illustrator. You mentioned R. Crumb, you're doing underground, free speech, and then sex ads that in some ways are sort of, footing the bill for this magazine that is very much off center compared to other things. But it seems like a lot of these, as part of your, not necessarily wanderlust, but your journey in your own life, physical, creative, you've kind of allowed for that conversation with the art. You've talked about you're working on American Mummy, you're marshaling forces. You also have to account for other folks who are footing the bill for the 3D, for all the stuff. But at the same time, when you can kind of make that transgressive cinema, the VHS movies, you push in when you want, because you don't have to worry about lenses in 3D, because it's just the shot you fucking want. So that's what you do. It just seems so interesting that you've been able to kind of do all that filmmaking, music, artwork, illustration, and still allowing that conversation to happen, and in some ways not being rigid about it, where it still seemingly is you.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that is true. I mean, I'm unencumbered by monetary success as a result of all this, so I must be doing. But anyway, I mean,
It's a great way to look at it, Charles.
I was going to ask, do you see that as a pro, Charles? I mean, I can see in some ways where it can be liberating as much as it can be angst inducing.
Yeah. No, throughout my, I've been lucky that mostly I've been able to do creative stuff in my life. But for example, in Gainesville, I drove a cab from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And worked in a restaurant and worked in a t-shirt shop. I mean, there's some overlap and stuff like that. And a lot of it, especially in the low budget realm, whether it's video or t-shirt stuff, is access. So if I have a job in a t-shirt shop, that means I have access to screens, and so so like on my lunch hour, I could print out band t-shirts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first moved to New York was in 1988 after I'd finished Twisted Issues, and so there was no nonlinear editing at that point, nothing like a computer type. There wasn't even the PC, I don't think. So in order to continue to work as a video filmmaker, I needed access. So I started interning at a place called Film Video Arts in New York. It was like just above Washington Square, right across the street from Rafik, which is where RAFIK, which was deeply embedded in the history of New York underground film, because they sold film. They were the place to go to get your Expendables and so on. If you didn't want to spend tons of money, Rafik was the one. And so on. And for a lot of people, you mentioned Rafik. Oh yeah, there were and there was a guy named Rafik who, hello, how can I help you? And stuff like that. But so access has always been kind of part of the struggle, and then of course just having a job. But what started this was I've had my most profoundly creative times when my work was something like dishwashing, and the reason why is I don't have to bring it home. It's a dishwashing job, and it's the parameters of it doing the job were pretty simple. Here's a dirty dish. You want to end up with a clean dish, so the brain just can go write songs, think of stories, whatever, and meanwhile you just. So I've tried to just find those kinds of jobs, so I'm retired now, but for the last 5 years of being a working stiff, I did pest control. So basically, I was alone in a truck for a lot of the time, pull up, put on the thing, go spray around the house, and it was arguably the best dishwashing job I've ever had, because it made good money and interactions were nice and for the most part. And I didn't like crawling in attics or crawling under houses, but I managed to avoid that as much as I could if I could still solve the problem, whatever the problem might be.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it allowed you the freedom, and that's really what you were looking for.
Yeah.
The freedom to think, the feeling to be creative. I think that's not too dissimilar from, you hear a novelist. What do? They work as a parking lot attendant, third shift. They start at midnight, they get off at 8. What are they doing that whole time? A few cars come in, but all their thoughts get out on paper, on their laptop, on their phone, whatever it is. The security guard that's walking the halls, making sure no one's breaking into the office building, but they're writing their screenplay. So it seems like the taxi driving, the dishwashing, the pest control, they're giving you time. And that's the thing that you're taking advantage of.
I was going to say, I'm a graphic designer, and while I love like the bigger projects and getting design, like events and things like that, there's some of those like you're talking about, Charles, like those just easy, like, for lack of a better term, brainless projects that you have to do. We just have to churn out like a page of something that just allows your brain to just like decompress from the big creative stuff. And I always get into these things with my manager who's like, I want to get you out of that stuff. I'm like, no. I'm like, I want to stay in that stuff because I need that as like the counterbalance so that I can go back into the bigger stuff.
Right.
Talking about your creativity is almost as interesting as the movie, but it's some of the things that I was able to find. So with American Mummy, you were director and editor, and I almost really want to talk about your editing background, not only in this movie, but generally. It was voted audience favorite at the Revelation Film Festival. It was shown at the Macabro International Horror Film Festival in Mexico City, and I definitely want to talk about that, especially in relation to 3D and also culture, and maybe some of your experiences with that. It was originally called Aztec Blood, but I was going to ask, is it because of the Tom Cruise movie or American Sniper or any confluence of these things that a movie like Aztec Blood becomes more mainly distributed as American Mummy?
That's a fair question, but it originally was American Mummy in like 2004. Because the guy who played the Russian, we had this conversation. He said, I got this title and American Mummy. And I'm like, no one's done that yet, because I'm thinking there's American Psycho, there's American Zombie. There really no one's done American. No, said I look, no one's done American. Oh, okay. And originally we were going to make it in 2006. I think we had a cast, we had a total table read and the whole thing, and then the money fell because it was right 2008. So it's whenever that thing, and the great crash, or
the .com.
Sure. Yeah. Not .com.
It was earlier. Yeah.
The real estate one that.
Sure. Oh yeah. Sure.
And so he had just either bought a house or something, and somebody said, Charles, I can't. I thought I had this money, and I don't have the money now to make the movie. And we were going to shoot it in video. I mean, it was going to be HD video. It was going to be. He used to work with Canon, and so it was these brand new Canon HDV and tapes, but that one step above DV. So it would have definitely been a much different movie because we were going to camp in the tents. We were going to just shoot it quick and dirty and shoot it like I shoot my movies. So like if I want to do a move, with 3D, you don't want to get people nauseated by movement. And that really can happen because the illusion is very successful. So that anyway, and I like these nice close-ups, weird, distorted. That doesn't work in 3D if because the illusion, if the lenses aren't, anyway, it just will never resolve as a 3D image because you're just too close. I mean, if you had a way to be far away and maybe zoom it, but that's a different thing than a distorted wide angle. So in other words, it's like if you have 17 words that you can use to make a movie, in 3D, there may be 7 or something, like, because you can't, there's certain grammatical things you don't want to do because you don't want to make people, ugh, like, so that was another reason why but again, I just watched Parasite again, and, there's all, okay, well, and the 3D is great. I mean, it works really well. So it isn't just movement. It could be because of the fact that it's this big wide thing. I don't know. I just felt very kind of, and again, because I wasn't hand holding it, I was like, can we do like it's all, you got to negotiate everything.
Yeah.
Sure. And I was gonna say, when you're initially thinking almost a decade before, hey, this is gonna be more, like I said, video, guerrilla filmmaking, the way you've kind of made movies, up to this point, finances that, I think you mentioned in an interview too, like you're like, yeah, like you're kind of, you're at the whim sometimes of the financier, and you're negotiating, sometimes making compromises. But at one point, does that go from a traditional film to, hey, all right, so I'm not making this film that I would normally be very easily at depth, I can move the camera I want, to, okay, now we're making a film in California with unions and actors, and like you mentioned, trucks arriving on scenes, multiple trucks, and now, wait, now we're throwing 3D on top of this? Okay. How did that evolution work?
That happened because okay, it collapsed in 2007 or whenever the crash was, and then periodically he would get on the phone and say, hey, Charles, so if I have are you still interested in doing this? Oh, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. So then eventually that phone call came and said, hey, I got some people want to put money into it. Great. The only catch is it has to be 3D. What? And this was like, really? Like why? But it was 2010 and Avatar had come out, and there's 2010 is a great year for films, because 3D films, because there's a lot of them out there, because everyone is trying to chase that, thing. Yeah. And, but initially it was just, so first he broke that to me, and then he's like, how do you feel about making a movie that will basically have one focal length? I'm like, it's basically going to be kind of a wide shot throughout. And then he sent me some French movie with Gerard Depardieu that most of it is shot like that, some period piece. And it's wonderful, and my thing really is, I mean, I don't mind limitations if that's, because then just work within them. I mean, as long as it's still fun. I mean, it's like, you have to do wearing a cast around your arm, well, maybe not. I don't want to do that. But okay, so it has to be a certain kind of wide angle. That's a challenge. It has to be 3D. But the neat thing about that is I learned about 3D. I'm like a professional student or whatever. Like, oh, okay, well, so I just saw a bunch of 3D movies, bought a 3D Toshiba 47-inch whatever, because I knew I had to edit it. I mean, I wasn't not going to edit it. So I needed a 3D TV to do that on, and as a result, and to this day, still it's like, it's 3D. Like I really prefer actual shot on 3D to conversions, though I understand wonderful stuff out there that's in conversion land. But basically, there used to be a website. I don't know if you ever saw it. Is it real or is it fake 3D? You ever seen that website? I think the guy finally sold it. I don't know if it's still there anymore, but he had a column, year, and this was real 3D and this is fake 3D. That's how he put it. And so basically I would just use that as my sort of, oh, okay, do they have it on Amazon yet or whatever, So anyway, so I became a big kind of fan of 3D movies as a result of having to make one. I mean, I first saw a 3D movie when I saw the Creature from the Black Lagoon when I was So I mean, that magic was definitely placed in my head, but until making American Mummy, I didn't really get into 3D with the enthusiasm that I still have for it. And I have a little 3D camcorder that I had this idea, maybe I'll just dick around and do some 3D stuff. I mean, I haven't yet, but I still have it. And so I don't know how far afield I've gone from whatever your question might be.
Yeah.
But the title, I just want to explain. So then we showed it as American Mummy in Australia, where it was audience favorite, but it tied with, which I think is even better, with Under the Skin, the Scarlett Johansson fuck of a movie. Such a great movie. And I think luck of the draw. I was sideswiped by fame, but in any case, I'm at that same festival we got audience favorite, and then in Mexico City it was American Mummy. But then right after that, as my producer was trying to find distributors, he got this sense that there was this fatigue with the title American, and then American Sniper came out, and then I was like, I was feeling kind of like, do I really want to have this kind of jingoistic, chauvinistic, nationalist? And then he said, we need to come up with another name. So blah, blah, blah. Mask of Blood was one I really liked, actually. And then by the time it actually got distributed, the Tom Cruise movie had come out. And then, I mean, I'll just speak freely. I think the cover sucks, but I understand they wanted to look like the Tom Cruise. So people at the place where you physically red box.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I'd read reviews. I thought I was getting the Tom Cruise movie. Like they just jammed the button and what? And it's like, that movie's not going to make anyone happy who expects to see a Tom Cruise movie. So I but this is where I am perpetually at odds with commerce and so on. It's like, so it was Aztec Blood briefly, and actually there's a the version at Tubi, it's on Tubi, it was it comes up as Aztec Blood in the titles. Because that's the last version that because and understand, as the editor and the artist, and it's my piece, it goes up and then comes down with the title, and the way it is on the DVD, it's just something else, and then that's life, kid. Someone else distributing it, it's their money, whatever. So I'm actually really pleased when I was on Tubi and I'm like, oh, it's Aztec Blood, and I'm like, oh, great, because there are subtitles under the Russian guy's speech, but they didn't make it into the release. So you watch it and you're just, what is he saying? Like, we're just listening to him yammer in Russian. And on some there's humor in those lines. There's wry observations. I mean, the whole subtext of humor there. Anyway, again, I'm happy the movie. I mean, I found it in the Walmart when it first came out. I was with my sister in Florida, and suddenly I was big man on campus, whatever, for a day. But all my movies are my children. So even though this child doesn't completely, I mean, I can't deny you are my child. But it didn't quite, because like something like We Await is the most fully evocative of what I wanted. Fully aware of all the limitations of video and stuff like that, but it told the story I wanted in the time that I wanted, in the pace that I wanted. I have no problem watching that from end to end, and I don't get bored or whatever. American Mummy, the parts I'm like, come on, but again, that's also if I'm watching it in 2D, because I'm like,
right.
Yeah.
And
that's you brought that up because when it premiered in Mexico City, in some ways, sounds like the audience was able to see it the way you would want them to see it in 3D where it seems to at least showcase the better version of your vision of your movie versus a 2D that doesn't seem to extenuate the things. You're like, no, we shot it this way. I shot it this way. I edited it this way for a reason. And at least it seems like, at least in Mexico City, that went well. And then also, it seems like also you're kind of on home turf for people who you're already deviating a bit from the usual mythology of the universal monsters. And I know we kind of have that shared love for Hammer horror, but here you are off center. You have an Aztec mummy, not an Egyptian mummy. And then it sounds like I read in one of your interviews, you have folks who kind of come and say, thank you for featuring our God, for kind of featuring our culture. And you're like, great. And you saw it in 2D, in 3D, even better.
Yeah. I mean, Mexico City was such a marvelous experience. Great group of people. The people who run that festival are just awesome. And you know, I had been in Mexico City in the early 90s or something, but you know, it's nothing like being there for a festival. You're being shown around, you have handlers, you know, and it's great. I mean, it's so much fun. I mean, and these people are, you know, I'm still friends with. I keep wanting to go back for one of the August. You know, there's part of me, well, go back if you have a movie, you know. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I feel like I should just go back because it's just a wonderful festival anyway. And yeah, and showing it there, because it really was. And this, my producer, God bless him, because when we were doing American Mummy, what's going to be about? Like what? Well, let's, you know, one of the ideas was, which I think is actually a great idea, but it would have just been too expensive to do, was it's called American Mummy, and it's set in the colonial age. And Betsy Ross, you know, who purportedly designed the American flag, it actually one of her seamstresses designed it. But Betsy claimed credit for it. And in the process of making that happen, she killed the seamstress and buried it wrapped in an American flag. So the idea would be that then years later, modern times, someone finds it in a chest or something. What is this? And opens it, the flag, and a zombie comes. Anyway, that I just thought was kind of a funny, but he was like, Charles, we're going to make this for like, you know, even when we're shooting in a video, the first idea, he's like, no, set it someplace remote. You know, it was either forest or desert, being California, you know. So that was one idea. Another idea was just that it would have been Native American mummy, and a whole other idea. So once we decided on this, actually, I lost my train of thought. I forgot where this was coming.
It sounds like less horses and carriages and more vodka and tents. That's the direction you had to go into.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent, nice. So that's. Yeah, but I feel like I was heading toward a point. But
I mean, a lot of it sounds like that's just the evolution of it. Sounds like, right? Like you're working with partners, you're working with actors, you're working with ideas. Those things are evolving. Those things are organic. Those things are alive.
Right.
There's something really interesting about your career. And again, I'm glad that Nick kind of connected us because, you know, in the same way that you talked about Creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, Pete and I are the, you know, Monsters of Filmland set, growing up with, you know, The Thing, growing up with movies like Parasite, where, and even in one of the interviews you mentioned, I think I was like, okay, this guy gets it. The idea of like a Saturday morning serial where it's as much Flash Gordon and there's something very escapist and fun and kind of juvenile, and you know what you're getting into and you love it. And it's like there's something about that that I think maybe the three of us may have grown up on, and seems to have influenced our artwork in the movies we watch at midnight and the movies we go to see in the theater, and in your case, the movies you make.
Right. And the movies I still, you know, enjoy. I mean, like I said, I just rewatched Parasite, and it's just insanely fun. Have you guys ever seen a movie called Squirm?
Oh yeah,
Sure.
Like that's I saw that in a drive-in, and just moments of Parasite with the gross made me think of Squirm a little bit. But
Wasn't that Rick Baker work on that? Was that like an early Rick Baker?
I don't know.
I feel like that sounds right, Pete. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, not important, but yeah. Okay.
All I know is I started to drive in, and the first feature was a movie called Tentacles.
I remember that movie.
Like a big Jaws type, trying to cash in on Jaws. But it was like, one of those, star-studded, and the poster would have all these, with, Jason Robards as the senator or whatever, and I think it was actually, though, John Huston. But anyway, and just so loaded with faces and stars and stuff. And it was, I don't know, maybe I'd like it now because I'd have more, but I was just like, eh. And then the second feature was Squirm. I didn't know anyone in it. It seemed like it was totally, and I think for me and my growth, that was because I was maybe 17 or something. That put an idea in my head of what a movie could be. Because I could see it all. Okay, that's shot there, the water, like everything, I don't know. It wasn't like when I think of Tentacles, I'm thinking of these big ships and hours and spaces. And there was just something so, and, it was Georgia, set in Georgia. I believe she filmed in Georgia. Rain, it just felt, and I was in Delray Beach, Florida. I was like, anyway, I love that movie. And it taught me that, star-studded, pretty basic lesson. But at the time, it was my first time experiencing that. Like, oh.
Is this the same drive-in, Charles, where you saw Texas Chainsaw, but also saw like Polanski's the Tenant? Because it's like that's where like your love of like I guess more low budget fare also meets like your love or discovery of like high art or cinema, capital C.
Right. Curiously, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was actually Fort Lauderdale because when it came out, which was like I don't know, it seemed like a long drive. And my older brother was in town and he drove us down there and we all saw it. And it was like whenever that was, 75 or something. And so that was the unusual, but some great place in Fort Lauderdale where there's screens there, you could, if you didn't like what you're looking at, you at least, oh man, you can watch this movie behind
you. Yeah, those 3 screen setups. Yeah.
Yeah. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre really just, that one just really, I just felt like no movie has gone this far before, and specifically is because the guy in the wheelchair, he got killed pretty early, if I recall. I haven't seen the movie since 1975. Strangely enough, I just haven't. I saw its sequel in 3D. Did you see the 3D Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Shot in true two camera 3D. It's its own little,
kind of an offshoot that still doesn't seem to step on the lore. It kind of expands it. Yeah, that was a great one. I think kind of like with your love of Drive Angry, where some of the I don't know if the native 3D, intentional 3D tends to hold up better, but I think it probably for the same reasons where you talked about your production in American Mummy, you have to think. You're thinking about shots and compositions. You're not doing this after the fact where, like you said, now it's capitalism informing the decision, not the creativity. All right, well, like you said, you're embracing the limitation. I got to shoot in this aspect ratio, this lens range. I got it, guys. I'm storyboarding in my head already. I know where we're going. Versus other people, hey, Avatar makes $1 billion. Well, maybe we can make half of that. Well, our movie's not in 3D. We'll figure out someone who can make it there.
Yeah, you're doing a hack, right? It's great that you can do that, but I imagine as a filmmaker, when you're putting in that effort in those days and you're having a problem solve with camera shots to do all of that work and be like, we did this on purpose because the plan was 3D, and then someone comes in, we just did a 3D conversion, as you're saying. I think I can understand very easily why you would have some issues with the conversions.
Well, no, and also, there's just something very tame about. But I still think I like the diorama effect. If it's effective, I'm cool with it. And I think some films go into it knowing we're going to do a 3D version, so they will have these freestanding things, even though they're because there is a science to it that I think is probably mostly effective. So part of it is, as you're saying, that I'm just sort of like, well, I mean, I guess throw enough money at it, you can make anything 3D. The Jurassic Park movies, for example, the 3D versions of them are actually quite good. But they're conversions. But it's just because Steven Spielberg has his own singular compositional stuff that already kind of does this kind of stacking and stuff like that. Because those work really well. The Jurassic Park in 3D.
That kind of reminds me too, just thinking about Parasite, where you have someone like Charles Band that, he's growing up, I think, watching these creature features in the 50s, Moana Beast and Ape, all of these gorilla amok type movies.
Yeah.
And then Tony Anthony makes Coming at Ya that seems to kind of like set the charge off. And, he's playing as much in the world of Sergio Leone and spaghetti westerns, but he's like, hey, what if it literally is in Coming at You in 3D? All right, well, now you go from the 50s to the 80s. All right, is 3D back? I'm not sure. Charles Band says, oh no, I think it's back, except he's probably looking at it. All right, well, I know what you're doing. You're doing a love letter to the good, the bad, and the ugly and all those guys. Well, I'm going to do it to creature features, but also it's going to be post-apocalyptic and sci-fi and low budget.
Right.
And my brother's going to do the music, and it's very much going to be directed by me, distributed by me. But you know what? For a 17-year-old kid that sees this late night cable, it's exactly what you want to see, because it's Charles Band. It's he's giving you everything you would want. And I think that's maybe the Parasite idea. You're watching that, you're seeing it move, you're seeing it. Seems like some of that informs your filmmaking when, American Mummy as well. You're like, hey, I've seen the good 3D movies.
Right. Yeah. The Bubble is another one. Have you guys seen The Bubble?
Sure.
I have not seen The Bubble.
I love The Bubble.
Yeah,
I love
Bubble's great. Yeah, Canadian film, just like The Mask, where whereas The Mask does it intermittently, and I can't remember his name, but he did a few of those. Orbin, I can't think of his name. He did a few.
Put on the mask. Put on the mask.
Put on the mask now. Yeah,
love that. Such a good gimmick, but I mean that's the thing that I think Creature. We all saw that. And that got us to our local 7-Elevens and convenience stores. We got to get the glasses. We got to put them on. They're putting Creature in 3D on the TV, and that's forget if the movie's right or bad. It's still gonna blow my mind because it's in 3D.
That's what it was. It was the glasses came in the newspaper or something. Like the Creature the Rock Lagoon played. It was in San Antonio, Texas. Played on a TV, and
We've had this conversation with a bunch of people, because I think from people like us from a certain generation that experienced that, like in the early 80s when that was broadcast, again, obviously before the internet, where I was in New York, Bernie was in Chicago, you're in Texas, like people all over the country have very specific memories, and they also have very specific touch points as to where you got the glasses from. Like for me, it was like you had to go to 7-Eleven or Burger King to get the glasses. You got to have the newspaper. It was just like this. It's a weird cultural touch point for like a very select group of us that grew up with that.
Wow. The first arm sticking out, the creature, that's that's the one. That's the that is so cool.
What I liked about when watching American Mummy is that you have some of like where we've been neck deep in like the 80s 3D stuff, which obviously was like a mini boom after the 50s and all of that. So a lot of just literally like cameras zooming in on the pipe coming out of the guy's stomach in Parasite, where like the blood starts coming out. You got a lot of that like gimmicky stuff, and you have some of that in American Mummy, which I appreciate and I very much enjoyed, and I have to imagine that was kind of done on purpose. But there's also like the shots, like you're saying, like unfortunately didn't get to see American Mummy in 3D because I watched it on Tubi. But what you're talking about, like when you're setting up shots, there's like that immersive effect as well, so that it's not just the gimmick. And I think watching Parasite again last night, like I don't think I appreciated Charles Band was doing some of that stuff. Like my brain kept going back to like the gimmicky stuff that I had seen, but there's also like mood, and there's shots that he has set up of like those slow zooms in on like the tray.
Yeah,
You know.
and yeah, exactly. No, I mean, there's some great stuff. Like in that bar, I think there's like you see things, and then there's a
hacking shot. Yeah.
Mhm.
there's a shot in American Mummy where the kid sneaks into this tent to steal a blade or knife or whatever, but it moves and all this stuff on. It looks really nice in 3D. I'm telling you, just the stuff on the table and he's in the distance. I mean, that stuff is. I love that. I mean, that's good stuff. Okay, something that I wish I'd, and if I ever do I can't imagine there being an audience for, but if someone wanted to do a 3D version of American Mummy again, re-release it, I would color it myself because I'd have more control, and I would. There's this one shot where um, the chick is just kind of turned into a zombie, and she barfs at the screen.
Yeah.
The green vomit. Love that scene.
Yeah. What actually happened was it hits this camera, the left eye camera, bop. And anyway, the producer said, you can't do that. I said, you can't leave it because what I like about it, if you're watching it in your 3D and, your trusting eyes are open to suddenly you actually get this, and I just had this image of a whole audience of people going, which I think, how cool is that? It's unique. You can't do that. You can't. So, that shot is actually a doubling of the right eye and then do a little parallax to give it a little bit of depth. So that's like, to me, is like a battle I wish I'd won, because I know, like it or not, whatever you think of this movie, that movie made you go, everyone in the audience. And I just think talk about an immersive 3D experience. I actually felt like I got plopped in the eye. Yeah. And what it was at that point, the DPs were getting all pissed off, the camera people, because that happened a fair lot. Blood and whatever would get, they have to clean the lens, and it's like, it's a 3D movie, I mean, that's what I would be like. The only times on set when I'd just be kind of, watching the blood spurt, and people who, the thing is, it's LA. No one knows that I made these quasi pornographic underground films. Really, they don't really, they just go from job to job. They don't really, so they were like, whoa, you really like this stuff, huh? But it was, this stuff, whatever, and knowing it was coming at the lens too, I love that stuff. Yeah.
There's that sort of shorthand, especially in the movie, that like there's a Raimi-ish quality about the filmmaking. Like when you're fully unleashed, you can see that little bit of Evil Dead in the movie. I think that's the movie literally, sorry, Spinal Tap, like goes to 11 a few times, and it's fun seeing that, because I can imagine, like, again, you're doing some storytelling, some building up, and then you get to stop the restraint, be like, all right, now we're going to cut off a guy's hand. Now we're going to vomit on the camera. And in the 3D, as much as you get the boyfriend that gets skewered in the beginning, and I think even seeing some of these movies, unfortunately, again, Pete was saying, as we've been delving into the deep end of the pool with these 80s 3D movies, some of them hard to find on 3D, hard to watch on 3D. And when you find them streaming or you find a physical copy, where the 3D is now, especially when you're looking at it. So even though watching American Mummy on 3D, the second that spear, I'm like, oh my God, this is Charles, like, just speaking to me, being like, this would be it. But then there were other shots I noticed where, like, Jose is holding the bowl and he's kind of doing a sacrifice. And I could just imagine, I think this guy would have had some of these scenes in 3D, but like you were talking, foreground, background, tracking, where you're kind of creating that shoebox. I like that, the way you described that kind of diorama that seems really intriguing to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, I mean, when you're at a, Museum of Natural History, I mean, to me, that's still, I'm still a kid in that sense, because it's just like, and there's, and then behind, and then if the behind that's a painting, I see that's a painting of the savannah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just this marvelously, you're in a fixed place, but you can kind of, and then, and again, so because there's like a scene where the Russian is, she says, maybe I'll have some of that vodka, and it's really dark and glug glug and so on. But in 3D, you really, even though it's really dark, you feel the hulk of his arms. And when it played in Australia had it played at two different venues at this Revelation Film Festival, but they just had state of the art, no doubt, well endowed state funding. Like just amazing. They were repeaters and stuff like this to make, so no matter where you were, it was a great, and it was like the kind of glasses, powered glasses. It was just amazing. It was amazing. That was so great. That was the world premiere. That was the first time I actually got to see it in a big screen with people. But then the second venue was more of like a little black box theater, smaller. It was kind of further away from the town center. And I got there kind of late or something, like maybe the movie had actually already started or something. How rude. And I come in and the place is packed, and I just am standing in the steps thing, in the aisle by the wall, and so many people in there. And then I'm looking at so I'm slightly at an obtuse angle to the action on the thing. And anyway, it's just a conversation with the Russian and the dark-haired girl, and long story short, I felt like I was in a crowded bus between these actual people and then these figures on the screen. It was just it was a great feeling. It was just like, oh wow, like that is really 3D. My God, because it was a smaller venue and the screen was closer to you. I think that was part of it, and that was kind of, you wouldn't be standing as the audience, but it's the 3D still worked. And so yeah, when it works, it can be really cool. Cool. All it comes down to is it's cool.
I was going to say that gets me to wonder, Charles, and take this where you want. What do you think your relationship is with control and your art? Because like all this talk, like when you mentioned shoebox and dioramas, right? Like I think of the idea of limiting the audience, but with purpose, right? Like you made the diorama and you purposely put a lid on it, and you said, you got to look through this hole, which means you got to see what I want you to see and how I want you to see it. Do you think control plays a big part in how you create, how you make things?
I don't like the word control. Choice, though. I would say choice. Like I'm the artist, and so this is what I choose to do. I mean, my shorthand for this, and for all I know, I already said in a review you've read or something, but it's just like, if I want to have a cockroach enter frame right and walk and leave frame left, I want to do it. I don't want to have a conversation about it. I don't want to implore a producer that is, what do you think about having the cockroach? Because to me, it all comes back to brushstroke. I just feel like it's gestural. So it is control. It's I just don't want to have to talk about it. And the thing is, making movies, you're talking to people who have the money, that if you're making real movies, which I've rarely had, I don't have much experience with that. So if I want to do, it's I want to have a red dot. If it's a painting, I want to put a red dot there. And, I want to put a red dot. Oh, maybe one. That's, I just want to have that kind of abandon, although I'm working with a different medium. I'm working with time and space and your movement and then performance. So, and I'm the first, for all this talk of control, I'm the first to say it's collaborative, man. Like deeply collaborative. It's all super collaborative, but the buck stops somewhere. And especially if I'm directing it, the buck stops with me. If I'm editing it, the buck definitely stops with me. I'm the last one with it. And that's fine. That's fine with me. So I know what I'm working with. Anyway, again, it would just got the fact that you can just go, with a camcorder as opposed to, okay, we need I mean, we didn't actually have this problem on this film, but I need a 50 millimeter lens. Okay, and everything's a process, and beautiful films are made with that process. It's just not really my thing.
Sometimes you just need those light fairies to show up when you need them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Now, is editing a necessity for you as a filmmaker director? You want it to be part and parcel. Hey, I'm directing the thing. I want to edit the thing.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, among other things is I feel like in the case of American Mummy, I don't know anyone else. I don't know. Yeah, now that is a control thing. I'll admit that is a control thing. I don't know why I have a problem with the term control. I think it's because if you read William S. Burroughs, control is the bad thing. But as an artist, the control, yeah, I want, and I edited a documentary on Dexter Romweber, who was the singer for a band called Flat Duo Jets, a southeastern seminal sort of punk rock era band, heavily featured in a movie called Athens, Georgia, Inside Out. If you ever heard of this documentary from 1990. Anyway, did this edited it, shot part of it. But the great thing was the producer, he would just show up once every 2 weeks or something, see what I've done. Hey, maybe, but basically he just let me do it. And it was, and I didn't realize until I talked to a friend who's, he edited the Daniel Johnston documentary. And he said the difference was the director was over his shoulder the whole time. And so, it's just a different, I like the autonomy of being alone with the thing, whether it's my project or whatever, and just do one more frame. Take it back. Like, especially in this digital age, one can be, with Twisted, actually with all the three of my SLV movies, it was all shot tape. It was edited tape to tape, which is arduous. And then you also have to really commit to, it's because you make a change. You can't just punch it in. You had to start at that place again and assemble the edit. I mean, it makes for a kind of muscularity and commitment to a cut. But it's great to be able to just in the world of pixels and just, you've already made the movie and then you just want to take 3 frames out here. You can do it.
Yeah.
It's maybe that's where, Charles, the word is not, it's a C word. It's just not control. It's more the word you said before. It's choice. It's being able to make that move with the frame, but also being able to do the edit because you want to make this specific choice.
Right.
Well, I imagine that experience that you had, doing the tape to tape, that probably instilled a decent discipline in you as well. That now, if you choose to make more films in the future, that now your aperture for doing that is wide open because you've got all these other options available to you that you didn't back then. But there's still that skill and that learned nature of doing those early films you did.
Right.
Now I have to ask, since you are big into music, was there any, or has there been any impetus to, you've done writing, directing, editing, to do score any of the films? You do the full Carpenter, or
Uh, with the three shot on video movies, there's a lot of bands in it, so a lot of songs. So and that, you know, uh, because well, whatever milieu I was in, it was like the locals who were musicians and stuff. So in Gainesville, the Gainesville movie Twisted Issues is very much a kind of scene report, to use maximum rock and roll kind of term, of that time and of that music scene. And in its own way, okay, Red Spear Lake, a lot of the New York music of that time, Missing Foundation, Cop Shoot Cop, all the Jim Thirlwell, Fetus, Lydia Lunch stuff. It was all of the time. And then We Await, ditto, a lot of San Francisco bands and some New York bands, because we were kind of bi-coastal at that point. So I have yet to score. I mean, I dick around with sound design a lot. I mean, We Await. I mean, the thing is, for example, We Await was the first time I had access to doing the audio, where I could, on a computer kind of place stuff. So for me, that was a great experience, because it was, I really wanted to create the sense of the Mission District in San Francisco and the density of sound. But that sound, it's all completely created, in the distance, there's a siren, maybe a gunshot goes off, all of things which you would hear in the Mission in San Francisco in 1996 or 4, whenever that was. Mexican music kind of, so I particularly like We Await for its sound design, because I do think it does, it's quite effectively creates a world. And that's kind of that is kind of the fun of any kind of sound design, is you're creating a world. And in as much as my movies don't come across as realistic per se, adding the sound stuff, real or not, you're in this fully realized dreamscape of sound and visuals and stuff like that.
Well, that kind of goes back to like talking about dioramas, because I feel like that's kind of like a similar aesthetic, because you go to the Museum of Natural History, you're seeing these things, that that's not real, but there's that verisimilitude of it where you're kind of just, it's something otherworldly about it. Because I had the same reaction as a kid to you. Like my grandparents taking me into Manhattan to go to Museum of Natural History and see all that stuff. It was just kind of like, it's so cool. Yeah. Like, and then whatever reason, I'm tossed back to like the scene in Planet of the Apes when Charlton Heston is running through Ape City and he comes across the apes' dioramas of the humans. I'm like, it's like there's something weird and funky about that. You're describing to me, like, in a lot of ways, like that diorama setting of like something that's it's not realistic, but there's a realism to it, even though it's still not that.
Right.
If you're not on the Serengeti plain with a lion, that you would, you're in the comfort of a museum watching this.
Right. But speaking of coming at you, like, I didn't see it when it came out, but I remember
we'd never heard of it.
We'd never heard of it.
Ads, there was a trailer for it, and then on TV, coming at you. There was a heavy rotation TV commercials. Spot.
You are the first person that we've talked to that actually has any memory of that, because
yes,
like Bernie and I, when we started researching this, and we were like, Coming at You was the first 80s 3D movie, and it was a Western, and we're like, what? So like that was like a revelation to us, and you're the first person that we've spoken to that like actually remembers like the promotional campaign for it.
Yeah, because I would have thought it was 70s, but you're right. Because I was back from college, I was working as a busboy, and there was a drive-in near the restaurant where I worked, and my friend and I went and saw Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Maybe it was a Monty Python movie, and the trailer was coming. We also saw Incredible Melting Man. I saw that at that same that same drive. Oh, such a memorable final shot in that. But I just recently saw Coming at You, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. Great. I mean, really good 3D. And that the scene with the rat coming.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
That scene. Absolutely. Like the little red beady eyes for those rats. So
had I seen it as a kid, I think that would have, I mean, or as I guess a college graduate at that point, but I think it would have had quite an effect on me because it's so great. And not a bad movie. And, I think holds up really well.
We were entertained watching it. Yeah, considering again, like going into it, like what are we gonna see here? And just that opening credit scene where they're literally just like anything that you could think of. Like it's like it's like the branding iron, like the bale of hay, the horse's hoof, like everything was just all like doing the push of the camera.
Yeah.
That's where I do think, Charles, you share the DNA with the Tony Anthonys and Charles Bands of the world. Because I think in doing research for this, I was seeing how a little West Coast connection. Tony Anthony, who at the time was working as like a Xerox salesman, so I think kind of leaning into hey, we all have that dishwashing job that gives us the opportunity to do other things. It was in 1979 at the Tiffany Theater in L.A. that they opened Dial M for Murder in 3D. And in researching for this project we're working on, it seems like that may have been where Tony Anthony saw that, and having already worked in Spain, already having made spaghetti westerns of his own, acted and produced in them. Now he sees this movie in 3D. He sees a Hitchcock film that works. It's kind of like us watching Creature. This is from a time before where they're showing it at midnights in Creature features, but damn it, you see Creature again in 3D. It's like watching it for the first time. I'm thinking, he's got to have been a lover of cinema. He sees Hitchcock now in 3D. He's like, screw this, guys. We're going to make a Western, but we're doing it in 3D. And then you have someone like Charles Band. Hey, I'm doing Wizard Video. I'm doing all of this. All right, well, I'm discovering VHS. All right, well, how do we make these movies? Well, we don't compete with the big guys. We make good VHS cover art, and we just make fun movies that you can just enjoy versus, say, like some of the other movies Pete and I have, the big guys. What's the Mount Rushmore for the 80s in the 3Ds? The Jaws, Friday the 13th 3D, Amityville 3D. Some of those seem to lack some of the, I don't know, some of that guerrilla filmmaking that seems to be in the way you think, in the way Charles Band think, in Tony Anthony. I want to make a movie that I'm going to enjoy, but damn it, I just want the audience to have a little fun, to be in that bus and that crowd that you're talking about, and just kind of get lost for 90-some minutes. Seems like some of the best 3D films, some of the best films have a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's got to be cool. It's got to be cool.
Yes.
It's to be fun.
Yeah. At some point in my both viewing films and also, I guess, thinking about making films, or it was the idea that a movie is like a ride. You get on the ride, and once you're on it, you I mean, I guess it was before video. I mean, my God, it takes me sometimes 2 or 3 nights to finish a movie right now because I got other family shit and whatever. And I just accept that. But in the days when you sat down in a theater, like, it's a ride. And so you once you're on the ride, that seems fake or whatever. Well, you're not having much fun on this ride then. I'm sorry. But, just get on the ride. And 3D seems to be the apotheosis of that because you're in it, and things are coming. And, I love Drive Angry for that reason, as far as like a relatively contemporary 3D movie. My God, it's just so fucking entertaining, and funny, and it knows what it is. Yes, exactly. It's
So I know that you said that you are, retired now, but any story ideas, anything coming in and out of the brain that's kind of got you like, well, maybe I give this a go.
Outside of a period piece with Betsy Ross, that is.
Yeah, well, that's a given. We'll wait for that.
I have I have a couple of things that have been long, gestating, whatever the term is, that I don't know if they need to be movies, like one. I mean, one is this sort of epic called Dimension Door, which actually be a great 3D movie when I think about it.
Good title too for a 3D flick.
Yeah, and it's kind of trippy, and there's a future world, there's the present world of the movie, which when I first conceived it would have been the end of right after doing Twisted Issues. The same people I did Twisted Issues with. What's our next movie? Dimension Door, and they were science fiction guys and stuff, and it's this very elaborate, involved. And what made it difficult at that time to even think about is we had to make the present be a slightly advanced present. But then as the years went by and I'm in New York and I see that in some, bodega or whatever, the TV, and it's, we're all connected, New York telephone. Dimension Door imagined a time that now we're already in that time. So what makes it easy, in a way, easier, is the present day time. I don't have to kind of make softly science fiction-y. It's now. I mean, it's now. One way or the other, it's now. And then there's this super dystopic future. But walking around New York one day, talking to my friend David Aaron Clark about who's the giant Jesus and We Await. I was describing Dimension Door to him, and we're a few blocks, and then he stops me and goes, "Charles, this isn't a movie, man. This is a novel. This is too much going on." No, well, but let me continue. So we walk a few more blocks. He stops me, "Charles, this is not a novel. This is a series of novels." So that kind of, I think he's correct. So over the years, I have taken, like, if Dimension Door is this like vat of bubbling ideas and stuff, and over the years I've taken and just taken a little ladle of it and put it in a narrative. And so there are pieces of Dimension Door in some of my other work. I don't know if I'll ever resolve Dimension Door. And one of the things that as soon as I retired, a solution for me as an artist would be, and this is what I hope to do, is a portrait of 7 of the main characters or something. And each portrait would kind of tell their story. I don't know if it'd be like, I don't want to go with like a tarot card per se, but I forget what the word is, but a portrait that would have a lot of the story in it.
I'm thinking of like an artist like Mucha, like you said, just that idea of like the tarot cards where you have these icons, accents, borders, things around them that kind of inform the character you're trying to build.
Yes. Yeah. And including perhaps some overtly narrative things. And the thing is, if I succeeded at doing these 7 portraits, I don't know that I need to make the movie. That's all I'm saying. For me as an artist, I mean, there's tons of text available, so anyway, that's one thing. That's this sort of unfocused thing. And then there's something called Thousand Eyes, which I wrote in San Francisco after making We Await, and in the throes of divorce and such. And basically that really kind of wrote itself. And it's a very violent, ugly, beautiful story that initially I had planned to make in San Francisco. I think it was going to be like, based on page length, maybe 45 minutes long. I was going to shoot it in 16 millimeter black and white. I just had this idea of what it was. So over the years, and actually one of the reasons why I came to LA was a producer here wanted to do, anyway, Thousand Eyes. And we actually were on the cusp of making it. And then I pulled the plug, like not the producer, but I did, because I didn't really feel right about it. And my life is littered with moments of me getting in my own way. I mean, that's just the truth. But for reasons, valid or not, I just didn't feel like I wanted to do this.
That
So
seems like a recurring theme, because you said that in another interview where you're like, you're almost, you talk people out of having you work on a project. Seems like that's another theme you kind of, that you're aware of.
uh, I don't know what that is. I'd like to think I've made the right decisions in each of those cases. But I don't know that I did. But so the Thousand Eyes never happened. I have since done one pass, basically, of turning the screenplay into a prose, like a novel or whatever. I don't know what's going to happen to that. A project that never got made, that was after Twist of Issues, before Red Spirit Lake, was called Killbillies, which I actually shot part of, and it became distilled down into We Await.
Mm-hmm.
But Killbillies was set in the country. It was like, if We Await take the actions take place in this kind of claustrophobic Mission District of San Francisco vibe, but it was supposed to be more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, out in the woods, remote. So, and some say that We Await is actually more effective because it's creepy thinking these people could be in the apartment above you doing the same things that, and I think that's true. But in any case, if someone's interested in doing a book about Killbillies, that would include printing the whole screenplay, but also because it went from wanting to make it in Super 8, then shooting some of it in 16, and then it becoming this 35 millimeter project with like Gibby from the Buttholes and Richard Edson and Debbie Harry and Joey Ramone, and it became this thing. And it was 1990, so Sex, Lies, and Videotape had just come out, and it was a time that if it had been made, it would have been a very interesting movie of its time.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that, a lot of reasons never happened, but the whole story of it never happening is what this guy wants to do a book about, which I think is okay. I mean, like, part of me is like, it's a story of a failed project, but I guess in talking to him about it, but it's a really interesting story about a failed project. Okay. Great. I mean, that's, so that, so I guess right now I'm in the mode of an archival mode. Like, I'm gathering the materials for Killbillies for this guy to maybe do a book about it. And then my God, it's like, again, a child that didn't quite, suddenly it has a life, if I make the paintings for Dimension Door, that might solve Dimension Door for me. Thousand Eyes, I still think I could make. If the context was right, that's the one that I think is doable. It's very contained. But again, in revisiting it and trying to revise it, there are no film booths. Like, I mean, this is just like a problem with an older. They don't have cell phones. Well, are you going to make a period piece about it's set in 1996, or do you want to, and when I was really wanting to make Thousand Eyes, and do you think you could set it on I could set it on a space station? It's like, it's about passion and desire and revenge. And could I set it on a space station? Probably. Someone wanted to make a space station movie. I have the script. It'll feel like a gangster movie kind of, but it's not. It's anyway. That one I think has the strongest bones, because it really was written as an expression of a divorced person going through a lot of shit. So it's all very real. It's the stuff happening is, and the rage is real. And the thing is, it's also was it Gestalt or whatever? It's like, I'm every character in it. I mean, as far as like, there's the cocky, full of hubris coxman, and then there's the hurt, ready for revenge crime boss, and then there's the, I acknowledge that it's a tapestry, and all the threads are me and my life at that time and stuff like that. Um, but other than that, just to return to, it's really hard to make a movie, man. And especially low budget. And I mean, I feel like I have the energy to do it. Maybe one more good movie, but it would, so many factors would have to come into play. And truthfully, in some ways, being in LA makes it a negative thing, because, shooting in the other places I've shot, it's sort of like, hey, can we shoot in this alley here? Sure, and it just feels like everyone's very film aware here. So, maybe they want $500 to shoot in the alley or whatever. And it's, it's like, I'm making up a lot of excuses. I mean, I think if you passionately want to do something, you do it. And that is how I feel. Right now, I'm kind of in a refractory period, trying to just finish up shit and get my art. I've got lots of artwork and stuff. I want to get it all photographed, and just kind of the recent fires that there were around here. We had go bags. I put my hard drives and everything, but I realized, well, my entire portfolio of paintings and drawings and stuff, that'll all burn. And it actually felt fine. Truthfully, I felt like, shit happens. But I feel like as a responsibility to the work, I should photograph everything, get it all. Yeah. And then when I flee with the hard drives, at least I have an image of,
But I mean, it sounds like, as I'm hearing you kind of process all what you've got going on and what you may have going on in the future, it sounds like there's definitely some itches still to be scratched. It's just, is the timing and everything kind of lining up to start scratching.
Yeah.
But you definitely don't sound like you are short of ideas and projects that you've got going on.
No, absolutely not. And, I still have music ideas, and I'm not really a musician, but anyway, in this world, we can find ways to, collaborate remotely or stuff like that. So I definitely have those kind of ideas still. And I'm just repeating myself. Yeah, I want to get through this kind of archival thing where I can feel like I feel encumbered by these incomplete things. And if I could just finish these things, then suddenly the horizon will open up, and maybe I do want to engage all these people into helping me with a project, someone. Yeah.
Or maybe something else comes along, because it sounds like, again, like going back to a theme of your life, like you're present and things present. Like, I think for a lot of creative people, like, if you're present and amongst things happening, you will be presented with opportunities. And then again, going back to that C word, the choice, you can choose to pursue that, or you can choose to let that go for now and maybe pick it up later, or you can choose to be okay with not touching it ever again.
That's a good summary.
It was like a good place. The art speaks to you, Charles, and sometimes so do the light fairies.